pretty much it. So let's bring it up to for Pooja for tonight's presentation.
Good evening. Hope everyone is doing well. Thanks for taking time out of our televised but also not televised state-funded genocide to be here to hear about some other immigration, migration on a global scale that impacts the local scale. So again, my name is Pooja Ravindran. I use they, them pronouns. I'm the Chief of Staff for the Committee on Immigrant and Refugee Rights, and I'm also Alderperson Andre Vasquez's Policy Director. If you live in the 40th Ward, I also was part of the ward. I was the Ward Constituent Services Director prior. So maybe I had helped you get a trash can or helped negotiate a parking ticket for you. Who knows? Today, though, we're going to be talking about this. I don't even know in tech terms if a dashboard is like the right word to describe what I've done. But Alderperson Vasquez and I, after he was appointed the chair of this committee by the mayor, we decided that we were interested in sort of promoting transparency, in moving progressive legislation that would increase access by our immigrant community in the city of Chicago to city services. We've got a big, immigrant population, starting with everyone. You'll hear everyone say this. The founder of the city was a Haitian immigrant who Lakeshore Drive is now renamed to reflect. With the onset of this kind of localized crisis, the background of that sort of being Texas Governor Greg Abbott, Florida, Governor Ron DeSantis, and some other sort of Republican cronies across the country decided to, quote unquote, make a fool out of folks, out of cities and states that declared themselves a sanctuary city or a state. And that designation means different things in different jurisdictions, but in the city of Chicago, it means a lot of it means that city officials will not comply with federal ICE agents, will not, do data sharing and things that are researched and the data shows that will likely lead to, incorrect deportations and just hassle while new arrivals are seeking to become some sort of citizen or are in the process of becoming a lawful permanent resident. This sort of charade started hitting Chicago in August of 2022. Obviously, we've seen steady trickles of migration and immigrants to Chicago for a long time. We know we've got a good Polish community. We've got little India. We've got little Italy. We've got little and big, sort of everything in the city. But for the city to really understand, and for as we make our asks to the federal government and to the state government about what it is the city of Chicago really needs, we thought that it was extremely necessary to showcase the scale at which this sort of manufactured crisis by Abbott and co. Was affecting Chicago, how many folks from where they were being bused and flown in, and sort of what is the set of infrastructure that's being set up to meet the moment with respect to this. So you can go on this little web sub page on the 40thward.org website /CIRR and read a little bit about it, but I'll just sort of get a little bit more into the meat of the data that we are sharing and why we think it's important. Um, After a lot of sort of requesting from the mayor's office about this data so that we could present it to Chicagoans, we started receiving, I think in June, I want to say late May or early June, we started receiving weekly briefings that provide some amount of data, obviously not all data. Um, it's all aggregate. It's all pre-aggregated and sent to us in a PDF form. So my Friday nights when I get this consist of like manually copying and pasting. So those of you in the little breakout group, get at me on data scraping from PDFs. I'll copy and paste a bunch of numbers that we get from the briefings, put it into Airtable, which is the sort of CRM we use on the ward side and on the committee side, that then has some automations that creates these cute little graphs that I've put up here, and then has different views. So I don't know how familiar folks are with Airtable, but that's kind of been my I say one of my partners in life. I just feel like I'm constantly talking about Airtable and love it. So I'll just take y'all through some of the things that we share. We have just a handy little. This is the dashboard piece. A quick look, a top line summary of sort of what's going on, so that people can immediately see the magnitude and scale of what's going on. So this first field is total arrivals to date in the city of Chicago. This doesn't necessarily mean that it's people who have stayed in the city of Chicago, but it's folks that have been that have landed in Chicago till date. This is a summation of those currently in shelters and in staging areas. So what we are seeing is that the city is rapidly setting up as many brick and mortars as it has the willpower to do so. But then those are the shelters. And then, as we all know, there are many people, roughly 2,500 staying at staging areas, which include police stations. There are about 500 people at O'Hare Airport, some folks at Midway Airport. And this excludes folks that we obviously don't know about or have been scooped up by churches or other sort of voluntary, mutual aid, voluntary providers of services, houses of faith, things like that. But in the city of Chicago's official capacity, there are about these many people, about 14,600 folks in these temporary locations that we are trying to cobble together based on federal ruling and what is allowed at the state and city level, trying to figure out, are they able to work in this city? If they are even eligible to work in the city, what are the 5 or 6 applications that they have to fill out? What is the wait time if you're applying to be an asylum seeker versus a parolee versus someone who's seeking temporary protected status, of which only certain nationalities can seek that based on what the president and the Homeland Security Department at the federal level say. So a lot of moving parts. They also break out the minors, and then this is the total shelter exits, which are people who are leaving the shelter system. So from what we understand, people arrive at the landing zone, and then because there are so many people on the wait list and we don't have enough shelter beds, they are sent to staging areas, or they exit the system completely and find other people that they want to stay with. There's also a component called out migration, right, which refers to people who land in Chicago but already have pre-existing movement plans to other cities or states, or even within Illinois, other municipalities. And then people then, are without the generosity and the Chicago spirit, people are just hanging out at police stations with no formality, barely any formality now, because at the insistence of mutual aid networks, there are meals being delivered. There are, at the city's expense, right? Meals being delivered, community-based organizations, nonprofit organizations that have been in this work historically, sort of checking in to the police stations every once in a while. But the real services happen once folks get to the shelters. And so shelter exits is an important metric because it then shows the success of the resettlement program. And there are all sorts of moving pieces, right? So you might have heard some stories about the base camps, the base tents, and then also, the fact that we're like piggybacking off of these contracts at the state level. But what it all kind of means is that the shelter exits are determined by the resettlement program, which is a contract that Catholic Charities has, which is a nonprofit group with the state that helps to match landlords to new arrivals, help sign a lease, and move them forward on their onwards journey if they intend to stay in Chicago. Some other cute fun little graphs. I was just noting today, I was putting in the data for the last couple of weeks. I was out of town, so I missed putting the last couple of weeks in. But I was noting that it appears, at least temporarily, we have hit peak shelter need, and which then speaks to hopefully an increased rate of people being resettled and moving out of shelters and staging areas. So the total of that is decreasing after kind of hitting this nuts peak. But this is just a little map, a little helpful map, so that you can see where all the new arrival shelters are located. This doesn't include all the other, I think it's like 51 shelters that the city of Chicago operates for varying demographics, but it's helpful to kind of see where things are located. And, getting into the politics side of things, if you have been keeping up with the news or even paying attention to city council meetings, there are a lot of tensions among Black alders and, brown alders, so like Asian and Latine alders around this. We have a history, y'all. I know I don't need to tell y'all, but we have a legacy history of being disingenuous and not providing the resources for minority communities, and rightly so. Some populations feel that they are not getting adequate service levels, and so one of those tensions, I bring that up in the course of talking about this map. One of those tensions is that property values, lease values tend to be lower on the south and west sides still. And so there's some tension from south and west side alders that a bunch of new arrivals are settling into these areas because they've been historically disinvested. And that's a conversation that we have to continue having. But as you can tell from the map, these are, spread out, and the city is really trying with care to make sure these shelters are being stood up across the city. So it's not just let's get a bunch of sites ready if we have the money, if we have the whatever aldermanic prerogative with these base camps, which are not reflected because we don't have one open yet. We've had some contracts on the books, but nothing has been opened yet. But there's a lot of politics that go into the location of these. So here I've just, again, using an automation from Airtable, I'm having it append a Google sheet whenever I get new data, and I tag it, it auto tags new data with a certain date, with a status that's like the latest update, and then it appends to a new line. And yeah, it's separated by graph, and so all these each bar has separations based on the location, so you can sort of drill down in detail. And again, I'm ripping these from PDFs, y'all, so it's not perfect data, like garbage in, garbage out. We're getting pre-aggregated data, and we are have been trying to nudge the city to get some of this from their native tools that they use to track stuff. And I know they're working on it. They just split apart they split apart in Lori Lightfoot times. They had combined the Department of Assets Information Services, and they have now decoupled that in this budget that's about to be passed tomorrow. And so I think a friend to Shai Hacknight, Nick Lucius, is going to be the head of the Department of Technology and Innovation. And the assets part will sort of live in the fleets and facility management department. So it'll decouple the sort of digital and technological from the assets, if that makes sense. So latest housing census updates. So like I said, we get the data based on where people are, so you can drill down a little bit, and this is just the latest info, but you can filter, group, and sort however you want to see whatever sorts of views that you want. This I know there are some just people who want to download all the data and make a bunch of their own graphs and a bunch of their own whatever. So trying to be, basically this is like an extension of the city data portal that we're trying to do here, so that you all can use this data and show us what we're missing if we're missing some stuff. Demographic information we also get, again, based on where folks are coming from. Most of the folks week on week are coming from Venezuela, but we also have a significant populations from Colombia and Haiti and Ecuador. By the time in crisis management, you kind of have to have a plan for data before, otherwise you end up with things like unknown. And if you take a look, you poke around in this data, some weeks we have an unknown category that has like 2,000 people in it, right? So what we're in this position that we're in as a committee, we're trying to figure out, hey, how can we use this moment as an opportunity to advise the city on how it can have a plan to track data for future emergencies and disasters and crises, moments of crisis. So we also get, the family unit. So if they're single men, single women, or individuals in the family. I am a non-binary person. I don't see myself reflected in this data. So we've got data capture issues from the get-go. And we are also hearing, because we're involved in the operations of it as well, like when you get to issues of interpersonal violence, domestic violence, and things like that, if you're not tracking this data correctly, it's hard to even convey the narrative at a later date. But we are hearing that, like, non-binary folks and different gendered folks and same-sex couples, they are experiencing a level of like difficulty that's not even captured in the numbers here. So just a little woke commentary for y'all on data collection. And then here again, if someone wants to like audit this and be like, hey, there'd be like a way better way to present this, it's like everyone is like in crisis mode, so I'm just tagging things as it makes sense in my brain. But you've got your exits till date, your people arrived till date, you're in shelters. We've got people arrivals placed in shelters by 311 as a total. We've also got placed in shelters in the past week. Arrived via Texas contracted buses in the past week. Arrived via Texas contracted buses with personal movement plans. And like, yes, I understand if we had the raw data per person, then we would be able to just do filters of everything based on that, but we don't have that yet. Again, working with Nick Lucius to hopefully get something in place like this if possible. And then we're building the rest of the website out, but we ask a lot of questions. Alderperson Vasquez is, a great boss to have from my perspective, because like he's inquisitive, and like we want real answers and real solutions. And so when we ask the city, what's your plan? Let's look at this. Like the 14th Ward office in a hearing asked, what are the standard operating procedures at police districts? Because there was like a whole, like, what is happening at these police districts? Um, when we get an answer, we kind of like throw it up here and provide a level of transparency for Chicagoans that we hope serves folks, and then we can get feedback. The city can get feedback based on what answers we're getting. It's helped us sort of hone in on like the biggest gaps, the biggest ways that we can provide recommendations on how to increase success with accommodating an increasing amount of new arrivals as we get to the Democratic National Convention at the end of 2024. We the former chair of the Committee on Immigrant and Refugee Rights didn't really hold meetings, and so like as a start, we're holding meetings every month. So if you're just interested in these issues, want to follow along, you can go to shycityclerk.org or .com. Yeah, because I should know that. I post it all the time on Twitter, but it's one of those. You can stream it. You can also follow along in person if you want to pop into City Hall, if you're a downtown girly like me. But again, we just try and put up all the information that we can here. Our upcoming meeting is December 7th at 9:30 a.m. in City Chambers, second floor. Again, you can stream it or pop in person. We're going to be discussing the history of immigration, migration in Chicago, because of these increased tensions between Black and Brown communities, who really feel that each of our camps is being under-resourced and that we're spending too much on, the other party. And so hopefully it's a learning opportunity. There are also, I believe the video archive for each of these is also up on the city clerk's website. So with that, I will end my part of my little presentation and take any questions or hear any comments. Thanks for following along.
Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing that. We do have some questions. Feel free to continue dropping questions in the chat too, and we'll be sure to ask them. So we have one question from Lori, who is curious if does the city or city council have access to like paid enterprise plans, or is the Fourth Ward have their own thing to access Airtable? They were just curious about like access to those tools.
Great question. I love this question so much. Each ward office gets an expense budget of $122,000 for the year. From this expense budget, we each of the 50 of our offices, and so that's the ward office budget, right? We also have a committee budget that's separate, but each of the committees as well make or enter contracts or enter into agreements with these vendors. And so we each are, the ward offices, each of us has like a Canon contract. Each of us has an independent Comcast contract. We pay for Airtable from the committee side. We pay for the enterprise plan. We have, I think there is one alder who is trying to integrate Airtable to all the other systems that the city has. And so we're trying to do that as well. And we are also trying to urge the city to utilize economies of scale, and also just it's better for information sharing. It's better for overall security if it's all hosted through the city. But like these are long-term contracts that are negotiated by like the mayor's office and the departments that don't even like hit my committee or the ward office staff level. So it is a pain, and it could really reduce a lot of unnecessary costs. So hopefully that answered your question, Lori.
Um, yeah, I think so. I think along with that too, I have a question about like, what if you could talk about what you know about what the sort of data pipeline is for this? Like, how is the data collected and then it's processed by someone, and then like you said, you mentioned that it sounds like the primary format that the data is then published in is like PDFs, and so I was kind of curious uh, if is that the only format that the data is available in? Is the city like working on uh, sharing that in any other like publicly available formats that, to be frank, don't involve you having to copy and paste a bunch of data that's already on a computer somewhere every Friday?
Yeah, I think the answer is like yes and no. I'm trying to pull up new arrivals Chicago. They are working on their own website as well with a little dashboard, mostly because we did it first, and they were like, "You're not the mayor's office, so we don't want you to like put this data if it's like incorrect." And like that's all fine. Like we only did it because of the absence of some of these things,
Mm-hmm.
and so they have some, and this is in theory from the raw, not aggregated data. So I think right now they've committed to giving us this weekly briefing in a PDF format because we have asked and we kind of said like, hey, we really need this because we deserve to show people, people deserve to see what's going on. But yeah, there's a commitment by the mayor's office and folks to sort of build out something that looks like what we
Mm-hmm.
have. And I think they were using something called like Salamander before. I don't know. I'm not a data guy, so like I actually don't know anything about any of these systems
Mm-hmm.
except for Airtable. But they use something called Salamander. I think the Office of Emergency Management and Communications is trying to configure another just database system that then can push live updates to this dashboard, all kind of in flux. And I think it's because we don't necessarily as a city like prioritize sort of like data and transparency in those ways.
Mm-hmm.
So all advocates from Shy Hack Night that can be like that can push for it. I don't know the history of the Chicago data portal and how that happened, but like it has served as a resource for me, and adding adding data sets to it like this is like invaluable.
And I imagine the data comes from like a variety of different sources, but like could you share anything about like what the collection methods are? Like I asked like for example, I've been involved in local volunteer efforts at the 17th district, and I know like part of what some of our volunteers do is like try to like keep track of folks like on a roster. And so I thought maybe other folks who are less involved might be interested to kind of hear the sort of patchwork way that all this information is collected.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. Eric, I mean, so each police district has a lead. Again, these are all volunteers. They have like a police district lead, under which they have a bunch of volunteers that do things like get people diapers, drive people to hospitals if they have scabies, and or walk them to school. Like just many of those iterations, and then the Office of Migrant Refugee Rights, which is kind of a new iteration of what the Office of New Americans used to be under Lightfoot.
Mm.
Um, there's now a deputy mayor for Immigrant Migrant Refugee Rights, which is new, which is something by executive order that Mayor Brandon Johnson sort of made happen, to address just you know these populations in Chicago. Um, and so there within IMRR, which sits in the mayor's office, there's someone who calls the mutual is in touch with the mutual aids like all the time, calls each district lead. There are like 21 police stations or 23 police districts, calls them every day to get the head count of the new number of people
Mm.
at the police station, sort of verifies that against the 311 data system. The 311 system is a Salesforce based system, that is the method to request housing. So if you're an unhoused person in the city of Chicago, you can call 311 or go online and request like a shelter, right? So that's another one. So Ray's kind of like hearing from the mutual aids for like, hey, count the people live right now, but also triangulating that with like the 311 data, as well as like the shelter data that is its own system of being tracked by the contractor who staffs the shelters for new arrivals. So it is, Eric, like you said, like extremely patchwork and no sort of data coherency from top to tail.
Mm-hmm.
And that extends to, I was talking to Catholic Charities, who I mentioned earlier, does the resettlement and out migration, and they have said it's hard to get sort of like data sharing agreements with the city of Chicago, and also they don't. Part of their contract is not, the scope of the contract doesn't include building out this data base management system that ties to other systems that could provide very useful information for the life and data of a new arrival here. But that is something that like we have not prioritized resourcing within the city.
Gotcha. Um, so Katie from the chat asks, how is this data being used and by whom?
How is this data being used and by whom? I mean, I think there are different tiers to that question. I mean, I think the
Yeah.
biggest one is building a case. I would assume the city is using it to build a case to request other resources from the state and federal government, right? So if we are collecting this data and we are saying there are these many people who are from these countries that speak Spanish, we probably need assistance in Spanish, for folks who are getting a city key, for folks who are getting going to the state DMV to get like licenses once they are able to get licenses. To tell, recently there was a news we received that the federal government's customs and immigrations department at the federal level is going to work with local community-based organizations to help folks who recently were approved for temporary protected status at the federal level to apply for these things. So it helps then say how much money will we need to help people apply for the various statuses that they think they're eligible for and they think they'll receive. So it's being for sure used in that way. I think it is also just being used to say like, hey, as a planning for logistics, right? Like, if these many people came in the last month, can we forecast what that looks like for every month leading up to the Democratic National Convention in August 2024? And what does that mean in terms of how many more brick and mortars we need to build, how many tent camps we need to stand up, especially given the winter weather. So I think it can be used and it is being used in those ways. I think it could probably be used in ways of something that we've noticed and that other folks have noticed and have submitted the feedback to us is that folks are staying in shelters for a long time. Like the rate of moving through shelters needs to decrease if we actually want to move the amount of people that we have from police stations into shelters, right? So it can be a tool for also just like dissecting trends and saying, hey, here's where we need to put more resources so we can free up the shelters and staging areas.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and anecdotally, like I've heard many cases, at least here in 17th district, where people go to move on to the shelters and then they come back to the police station because of the conditions at the shelters, and that, you know, I'm sure like that's hard to represent on a dashboard, but it's like, contributes to the backlog that maybe the dashboard helps to express.
Yeah.
So Katie asked another good question too, which is what are the 2 or 3 things that would help the policy debate and help the city response that you don't have data about?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Katie, because we've been trying to like wrap our minds around it too. I think it's all based in couched in your values, right? And like we're progressives, like left of center or whatever that means to people. But um, I think the one thing that we've been trying to understand and communicate to folks is like, of the resources we're spending, all the $16.6 billion that the city is spending every year on operations, how much of that is going to Black communities? How much of that is going to support like legacy minoritized populations and current minoritized populations?
Mm-hmm.
Because it makes sense. Black elders are like, you are saying that you want to spend $150 million in this budget. Not no line items, no line itemization of like how the money is going to be spent, but like, how can I approve that budget when like I've seen the same folks in my community struggle for like 30 years?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so I don't think that, the answer is not we have not spent money on it, but I think how do we show that the city is spending money where it's saying its mouth is? And I think it has not really been communicated super well. I think you can point to like programs that the city has stood up or something, but you're not able to get to the tangible communities that it's helping, or showing like, how many people are in a different like tax bracket, or how many people have been upwardly mobilized because of the programs that are impacted by the city. So that's
Mm-hmm.
something that we're trying to like uncover, that we absolutely don't have the data or the ability to like, I mean, I don't have the data for that because it's not my job. But like, I've never seen that presented to me, so I don't know if anyone is even like analyzing that. And also, like, a lot of it is people are, even the chambers of commerce, a lot of people with businesses see immigrants, migrants as like cheap labor, right? And so, to me personally, like the inherent value of a human being should not be tied to their ability to provide cheap labor to the United States, or any economy. And so the sort of like global trends of US and other destabilization around the world and how it impacts migration patterns, I'm starting to look into that, but it's hard to really like have that big picture of that, and then like have that like drill down into how it affects Chicago specifically,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah.
so I don't know if that was just me rambling, but hopefully that answers some of your
Yeah. No,
questions.
totally. I think we have time for at least a couple more questions. Uh, from the chat, Felipe asks, is there a way for property owners or landlords to take in migrants?
Yes. There is a form um, that the city of Chicago hosts along with Catholic Charities, that if you are a landlord, then you can fill it out and you can be on a list for them to do the little speed dating of like, homeowners to uh, people who need homes. So I can
Oh,
send
that's
that to
cute.
you. Yeah, isn't it?
I wish I owned 20 buildings so I could speed date with migrants.
um, I can send that to you after this. I can send you that
Sure.
form
Yeah,
after
and
this.
we can post it in the chat too.
Awesome.
Um, I wondered if you want to talk a little bit about your experience of putting together this dashboard and maybe what the plan is for what might be next. Like you said, the city's working on a dashboard. You still have this dashboard. There's probably things that you wish you didn't have to do yourself. And I think I don't want to say it's a spoiler to say that I'm aware of the fact that you made the dashboard yourself in
Okay.
true shy hacknight fashion, whether or not you knew it. But so like I'm kind of curious, like what did you learn through that process? What are you not happy about, like with the way the information is currently displayed, and like are there ways that you could see folks helping with that, or are we just like waiting for the city to build something new? If any of those aspects sound interesting to talk about.
Yeah, all of them. I spent three nights in a row doing this, and I did that because I am not like a coder, so I'm sure y'all could have done it in like 3 hours. I did it in 3 days. But Airtable, the reason I F with Airtable so much is because it is not script, like it doesn't have to be script based. Like everything is kind of readily programmable. I know there's like a tech word for it. It's escaping me at this current moment.
That's
But
okay.
like,
We don't, jargon is unnecessary.
okay, but I can just like make things happen by asking it to just like do what I want it to do. So like, I have a bunch of automations set up so that I don't have to create a new record from scratch every single time. So at a certain time, if a status is updated at a certain time, it'll just automatically create that record. So I don't have to manually do that. If a new record comes in, I can say, update the status, and change the one that was old to old census update and the new one to latest update or whatever. And then this is the sort of like appending of information that I was talking about. So I'm like finding a bunch of records, based on what I'm manually inputting, and then I'm like appending them to the Google spreadsheet that then pushes the visualization, right? So those things are like really cool, which is why I mess with Airtable heavy. Um, but I don't know everything, and obviously like I'm not ashamed to say like it kind of looks ugly. Like my tags aren't great.
Yeah.
Like some of the stuff is just like I had to get this data up here. I don't know the best way to do it, but like especially things like these statuses where it's like by arrival or housing status. It's
Mm-hmm.
like they're ugly, and so yeah, if anyone is like I know how to do it and I know how to make this look pretty. Um, but I don't want to, I don't have the capacity to pay for like Looker Studio Premium or something like that. I don't have like the little widgets that I can pay for. So it's like, zero to lean budget. Actually, zero budget. I'm going to say zero budget. Um, and then how to like convey this data pretty would be good. And then just to go back to this, so like I'm copying from, so like this is, I have these like little views, and then the following week, so this is the ones that are empty, right? I'm gonna get a new load on the 17th, and so I have these pre-created records based on these automations, but I have to come and manually rip them and like put them in like number of people. I'm
Mm-hmm.
copying pasting like 1,000 people at AIC and putting them in here. So if that, obviously it would be great if there, yeah, and with Airtable you can create a form, right? But like no, the city is not using Airtable,
Right.
and there's no integration between the city's DBM and mine here, so there's like no way to like easily, for me, get that information without like writing a ripping script, which I do
Mm-hmm.
not know how to do, and I'm not going to spend time doing. So yeah, if
Right.
people know like how to do all that stuff, hit me up.
Cool. I think we can squeeze in one last question. So earlier in your talk, you talked about like the sort of how the need eventually arose to show the scale of the crisis. Um, and I was wondering if you could talk at all like about how the logistical problems associated with this crisis start to get compounded like almost linearly by like the number of people that are involved in this system. So like I've been observing this as I've been volunteering is like stuff gets more backed up. It gets like exponentially harder to serve these people. And like you mentioned, like the temporary work permits will like help, but then it's like all of these people will need legal services, and like there's only so many lawyers, and they can only work so fast. And so I wonder if you could kind of share some. I mean, maybe those are some examples, but maybe you can. I'm sure you can speak to that better than I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it right. Without a plan to address some of these things on the front end, if you don't have scalable systems already that can can be turned on, then you're, and I hate the phrase like building the plane while you're flying it, but like you are building the plane while you're flying it because you haven't literally spent time and resources building the damn plane.
Mm-hmm.
So that is really the, I mean, that and like comprehensive immigration reform. So like Congress, if you're listening, get on it. But like, there are so many things like forms. There's so many duplicative forms that people have to fill out that even
Mhm.
like some the software like Airtable could help with, because there's like the ability to like create these auto, and I'm going to pull this up while I talk about it, but there's ability to like template out a bunch of stuff and then just pull like unique, like capture unique information and then have it be pushed out to different places,
Mhm.
you know, as you need it to, and not have that be something that you have to like recreate every single time. So like even here, right, Airtable has this like templating capacity where anytime I have like a meeting that I want to post, all I have to do is like I've already loaded in the header. I've already loaded in like, you know, Andre's signature somewhere. All I have to do is, and this language I've already preloaded. I just have to add in like the date and like the subject and, you know,
Mhm.
whatever, and it'll automatically do that. But no one else is doing that, right? Because attorneys bag is not technology. So like the attorneys are
Right.
like, I know how to fill out these forms, but like I'm filling out like name on 5 different forms.
Mhm.
And there's
Right.
no solution that's like kind of like addressing that. And obviously, as there's fewer resources and as people become more fatigued, every new person is a load on the system, because the comprehensive immigration reform has not happened yet, and we're just piecemealing all these things together.
Right. Yeah. Totally.
Yeah.
All right. Well, cool. I think with that, we're coming up to 8 o'clock. So thanks again, Pooja. Thanks for hacking this together months ago, and thanks for sharing where things are at. And thanks for all the work that you do every day on this crisis. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with us about it tonight.
Thank you. Appreciate you, my friend. I will see you around.
Yeah, we'll see you. Um, and we'll be posting a recording of this as well. For folks who are able to stick around, you can join our remote Zoom, and we'll have intros and talk about stuff there. And that's it. Thanks for coming to the presentation. We'll see you in the hacking portion of the evening shortly.